And then this is you again.
Yes.
So should what we did this down to with what?
You want to start off
Where? When is she leaving?
Yeah, I thought that was our presentation.
But as I said, on this bit here, so
then you can also be.
you've got to try and get through exam.
Yes.
So her brother migrated. Which one?
And then you're going to do
That's
an
number
exercise.
2.
They do another.
Yeah. No, it's pretty.
So you just have to know what time it is. If it's an hour. So we'll give you an hour. Good. Once you start going over. Well, yeah, talking. I mean, I think if you're talking, the only thing to say is some of them are very theoretical, whereas some of them, this one, for example, takes you to a real place, a real time, and therefore you say something.
I know, you know what's not that language, I'm surprised.
He's talking all in that.
Yeah, she's saying she did.
What was say, for example, that, which is why it's double the amount of time it's saying. If you could say that stuff, core theory,
Okay.
you may
Just those two.
Yeah, will they use the bit stuff in the nation?
It feels like yeah.
So do you want me to move that slide? If I can work out how to do this. That thing? No. Don't think it's that thing. Oh no, I'm not scared. Go away. Horrible thing. God, Zook. Go away. Escape. 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 Right.
Oh.
Have you moved to this class? No, I'm speaking. Yeah. No, I didn't. It's too light. Yeah.
I'll just charge it,
How was your we had this, like, I heard there was a lot of applause when it was being because we were so stressed. It's okay. I know things like that, so it was like really scary.
Stop doing that.
But you would have lashes.
Okay, I'm not going to move anything. We can just run about.
Yeah, I've learned that. So no, it's good. It's good. How about you? We submitted the thing inside. Yes, that would be me. Hi everybody. Yeah.
It's the end! I'm kind of sad.
Yeah.
Morning.
I'm very sad. It always comes and goes. It's so whirlwind. How are you holding up? Okay.
You're okay.
Okay, so you the course is all. You are present. That's needed. How are you?
Getting better. Day by day.
And how are you, Lars?
Very well.
Order another table. I want to do very well. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 14. So there's about 6 people missing. I'm never quite sure. And I'm really quite do we know anything about that? Some of them we know have gone back to wherever they want to be. Like we know that Josephine is in Sierra Leone. We know that Hannah is in Egypt. We know that anyone else?
Pushkar is in India.
Who's in India?
Pushkar.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Pushkar's in India. That's right. So that's 3. So there you are. Maybe some extra people will turn up, but maybe not. And this session on the event with a capital E, or sometimes not, is brought to you. Well, okay, and roughly speaking, it takes the form of 3 main parts, and each part gets shorter. As your tolerance gets smaller. The first is Badiou's event itself, and that's Badiou was going to start with some of the theory that Badiou is building on. So some of his extraordinary ideas. And I wanted to say, if you haven't had a chance to read this, I read it again every year, and every year I find something more in it. So I do recommend it. It's a great read. It's really funny. As well as absolutely doom-laden. The entire world is so messed up. And he describes it with this kind of somewhat overgeneralizing, you might say. But anyway, it all seems very true, and it's just really, really written. So I very much recommend it. So we start with some of his theoretical ideas. We move on to some exploration of this particular idea of the riot. And it is the culmination of unruly politics, because it is a real form of rupture and change. It's unruliness in its absolute essence. And then we do a little bit of criticizing of Badiou, and we also move to Bina Das, and we look at her idea of the event, which is they're connected, but they're very different. She comes at what she calls critical events, and she brings in violence, which the connection for me is that Bina Das puts violence right at the centre and says, it's sort of inescapable, it's always there. Whereas what Badiou is saying is beyond violence is this amazing state of possibility. But you will explore that. So let me now hand over to Badiou, who's going to take the first part of the session.
So Unruly Badiou is a French philosopher, and it's very hard to be a communist in the times, even in Europe, and he himself identifies as a communist thinker. Partly people disagree with it. He's quite obsessed with the number 3 in terms of number of papers that he had written in university, number of wives he had, and the theory of his three specific characters of how he identifies the struggle. So he says any riot, as we are going through the time of history, has three things in common. First one, it's a struggle of the oppressed, which is against the dominant ideology. They have some invariant goals. So at any point of history, they will be overcoming exploitation. They will be fighting against some tyranny. And all these past struggles are not independent, but you can draw a common thread through it that they can be born in any single time frame and manner, and you can always learn something from the past. And thus, he gives the four definitions of the communism. This is not the communism that Marx and other people have advocated, but a very different sort of communism that he speaks about has the four dimension of will, where the freedom is the integral part, the dimension of equality, where there will be world without any hierarchies, the dimension of confidence, where you can trust the mass leadership and public in general, and the dimension of authority that people will have. Now, this necessarily is a different sort of communist hypothesis, a book that he has written, largely applauded by Zizek, another communist philosopher who is identified as superstar philosopher of our times. So he identifies these four traits about Badiou's idea, how it is different from the idea of communism that we know about. So this is not the Soviet communism. This is a not Marxist communism that he says. It's unhistorical, as Marxist communism is based on the historical analysis and dialectics, but this is eternal. For Badiou, the communism starts at very beginning of the history with the writing of Pluto, and it moves on and ends with Mao. He says the age of Soviet Unions or the revolutions in the past, the revolution in the China, we have to analyze them from a very different paradigm. We have to analyze all the riots, all the events that happen in the history through the new lenses. We have to reinterpret it with his own tools. And his one of the main argument why he is not the communist that we call communism as is he opposes the idea of the party and the state. So he says the spaces of activism or the riot are beyond the state and the parties. There are some unruly spaces that we could fill in. Through his philosophy, he tries to fill in those spaces, be it theater, cinema, and other sorts of arts, which could act as in support to what in the previous years state and party used to done. And thus he defines event. So event is an idea which he gives as a role which occurs unpredictably and which does not make sense according to the situation. Now the words that he is using within this template have its different meaning. When he says situation, it means a point in history. When he means a point, he means something different that he wants to convey. So do not take all these words at its prima facie value. When the event is written in capital E, it means something different. When it is quoted in in double quote, it makes something different. But roughly, we can identify the event is something that has potential to change. I will just fill in one example with this. He calls love and revolution both as event. So he asks how both are the event. He says both changes the tradition. Love changes a person from one situation to another. It asks you to explore yourself. So does the revolution. It looks at the society through different lenses and aspires to change the society. The change that these two things try to make are totally unrelated. They occur at any point of time. The theory of revolution says revolution erupts at any point of time. You cannot predict it. So does love. So he sees both of these things together and calls such things as event. And here there should be an intervention to trigger this event. So if we want to lead any revolution or make any riot in the history throughout the time, we have to do some intervention through it. And thus he refers to this line in the song The International, where he says, "We are nothing and we shall become everything." So the journey towards the event, out of nothing is happening. The world is at standstill. He asks people to change something, do some irreversible events out of their existence and make something out of nothing. And hence, he proposes the different idea of truth. For Badiou, the truth has four different procedures. One is art, science, politics, and love. and he calls them as truth processes. The people who carry these processes, he calls them as militants. By all the means, he advocates this language which might find which sounds very violent, but he actually thinks this in the terms of any possibility of the change. They are subjective during nature. They are particularly different in their materials from what terms these events emerge. They are universal in their address and its result. So at any point within the time of history, within the time of places, at any particular instant, within different countries, within different communities, this event could happen. In earlier times, when Marx had predicted how the revolutions would happen, they had stated it differently for Asia and Europe, the Asiatic mode of production, and how the revolutions will follow. Badiou destroys that narrative, and he says the truth procedures are different than revolution, and it could happen at any point of history, and it necessarily would happen within the masses. It's infinite in its being something that is different from what the revolutionary doctrine is. Being is something what we are apart from the processes of these. So as an individual, if we are distinct from these four domains of the truth procedures, what we have to do is to find the truth in the particular situation that we are navigating in. He finds the truth in every of these situations, whether you are an artist, whether you are a scientist, if you are a politician, or you are just a lover. He says there is possibility of finding a truth and revolution within these instances. And thus he introduces one of the character in his very simple plays called Ahmed the Philosopher. With all of the books written about philosophy, he suddenly writes 32 different sort of plays where the Ahmed the Philosopher is a central character. He is an Algerian who's living in France, working in the construction projects, laughs a lot, cracks a lot of jokes, meet fascist leaders, common people, his girlfriend, and in one-to-one conversations, he explores the ideas of how his life and the life around all of these people could be different. He is always carrying a stick in his hand. This is one of the screenshot of Ahmed's play that we had directed quite a long ago. And these are the two tools that he often uses, which is thought and force. Using these two tools, he tries to change the world. And this conversations of him with the common public becomes a comic theater. Badiou has written Ahmed the Philosopher character through at the starting point when he was writing Ahmed the Subtle, and then eventually throughout this process he reached to the point where he identifies a common worker from the street as a philosopher. I ask you to read this passage from this is a except from the play called The Nation, which he has written.
I want to suggest that we get two people.
Yeah.
One person be Ahmed and the other person be Madam Constable. And just read it like you were reading
Ahmed is an immigrant in France, and Madame Pomston is one of the French lady who thinks Ahmed shouldn't live in France anymore.
We'll get there. Okay, go for it.
Who is Ahmed? I want to be the first one.
Who wants to be Ahmed?
I can be Ahmed.
Sure. Yes, please.
The law comes along and says, one day, those who are here are from here, they're French. And then the law says, I see some people who are here, but who aren't from here. Not French. Not skin, not race, not smell. Just the law. What are you proposing? A very simple yes, whose no is a no. Someone who's here is from here. Someone who lives here, leave him in peace. A country, this one or any other, is made up of people who live there.
Never. Never is yes. No and double no. Just think. Everybody from somewhere else whom we're going to say yes is from here. It's a nightmare. It's the end of the French piece.
Oops. Race. You said it, race. I thought it was only the law.
Get lost, you walk a little motherfucker.
Whose mother, may I ask?
Just look at the tools that he has used. He wants to propose the idea of what constitutes a nation as. He asks you what the idea of nation is. So people tell him that it's not about which race you are, what smell you have, but just the law. But he engages this lady in the conversation. At some point, lady speaks the truth, that it is all about race. And then he does not attack them. He does not attack them of any sort. He makes a joke out of it. Even when people curse him, he just makes another joke out of it. And that's what the beauty of Badiou's writing and the beauty of Ahmed, that he creates these procedures in the art and politics at the same time, and he navigates through it using love, using the stick of thought and force. This, as a starting point, was of conversation in many countries of what you constitute idea of citizenship or of nation. So maybe we can do the small exercise where there will be two characters. One will be the applicant who is applying for the citizenship in your country, who's sitting next to you, and you are the gatekeeper. You are a rude, jingoist, right-wing politician, thinks that the other person should never become citizen of your country. So if Peta and I are doing this, Peta is applying for the citizenship of India, and I'm the one who's saying, no, you cannot become citizen of India ever because you differ from us from these points, which you have to try to think from what a right-wing politician, jingoist, who does not want anyone to be part of them as, and try to have a conversation with them, and list down the points where you think they differ from you, be as ruthless as possible, and take a look at the list, match with the PS, and what do you think, which are the aspects that you can talk more about, which are the aspect of your nationality you can joke about. Maybe you can try to become like Ahmed and try to having the conversation from the prompts that Ahmed is using. We will just try it if you're okay. Just with the person sitting next to you, get in the piece. 1 minute. Is the idea clear to everyone?
We'll give you about 10 minutes for that.
Yeah. Anyone of them?
You can do the
Well, we did talk about this.
You're supposed to be.
Sorry.
Yeah, supposed to be. No, but I want to hear the line.
What I was going to say. People are friendly.
It's just supposed to convince me. So I said,
Anyone of them? Yeah, pick one.
What would you do?
What do you have to do?
All the hours. I'll bring some pounds.
oh my gosh,
You probably. No. You have to
not sure.
What are you expecting?
Yeah, I'm not getting it.
Okay, so you get feedback, right?
Yeah.
Why am I leaving?
I try my best, but it's
Why are you leaving?
comprehend why I was
Why would you want to apply now when you
Okay, but now we have to start.
I just need
Yeah, I'll just myself. Okay, so he likes
Yeah.
Do you want to be the gatekeeper?
I know, I'm just
Oh yes.
Shall I be a grade Sorry, dude, I can't even pronounce it.
What are you expecting?
This is and you think like
Yeah.
I can this might be nice. But I don't see this. Obviously, I know these things are Are you getting married
Can I have your attention? Were any of the applicants successful in making?
He's British. We welcome him with open arms.
So, as if you have got the choice.
You had a choice back in the day too.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to ask which themes were discussed. I mean, I'm particularly sure that okay, in how many conversations the aspect of race was discussed? Race, little bit, yeah.
Yeah, we said skin color.
Skin color.
Yes, skin color.
Okay. Language. Language. Yeah. Traditions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Western liberal values.
Tradition, religion.
Tradition. Society, norms, culture, taboo, religion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Religion.
Yeah.
Economic
You want to economic
Economic contribution.
economic contribution. What jobs do they do? How they are beneficial for the economy? Okay. What other things you discussed maybe? Sorry.
Reproduction.
Production.
Reproduction.
Okay. Reproduction. Okay.
Yeah, we just had to. It was a pregnant applicant.
Okay.
He said you'll be a burden on the country.
No, we have the opposite because we're going to
Oh.
Yes.
Housing.
Housing.
really important.
Resources.
It is.
If you want to dwell a little bit more on it.
I think there's our points were different, but it's interesting, like dynamics. So this was someone from Mongolia to the UK, and we said that they're marrying someone in the UK for social security, and they're
Not
pregnant.
gonna get this.
And we just said that you'll be a burden, and if you were to leave your husband, we would send you back after the divorce because your value is tied to the man you married, who is the actual citizen of UK, and you are just a dependent.
Sounds British to me. So sorry. How many times maybe festivals were discussed or the hobbies
Hobbies,
were discussed?
Cricket.
Cricket. Yes. Maybe their ability to amalgamate with people or have a smooth conversation or find like-minded peers, making someone else happy were discussed.
Feeling of speaking the language.
In the case of the partners or maybe the pregnant one, was there any element of love was discussed? That's what. So the idea of the nation, when the Badiou puts it, is what he calls as a vicious cycle. When you constitute a nation, he says we think on the aspects that are given in the history to us. We think on the aspect of the boundaries that were drawn by few people thousands years back, and we dwell on those boundaries. Even when after 2,000 years of civilization, we are still in that vicious cycle. Hegel calls this as bad infinity. We are in the loop, in the constant loop. So we are changing our society tremendously, but these all old cycles are still there. And thus, Ahmed comes with his stick and he breaks that vicious cycle. His stick is made of thought and force, which he calls philosopher's stick, a thinking stick. And he breaks this vicious cycle. That rupture he calls an event, where this vicious cycle is broken. And now you think on different terms. So he has a French girlfriend, white one, and he's a Hajid, sorry to put it that explicitly, but he, in all the encounters, he think of very basic things. So the conversations that he has with his girlfriend are about where are you? They are facing each other's back and talking to each other and trying to find where are you? On this point, that it is hard to locate love in this world, and at certain point they meet together. With this small events, he tried to bring us to the idea of how we can break this cycle away and make this world a better place. Yep.
I just on this point of love, I'm trying to understand like how it comes in. So you're either trying to explain they're not facing each other, so
Yeah.
they can't see it.
Yeah.
But then how does it connect it to the other things about
Yeah.
nature?
You want me to give a minute? Yeah. So the idea of love, as Badiou puts it, is his idea of communism. He sees as the extension of it. He defines love as the minimal form of communism. And for him, communism is something that you think of other being away from yourself. So becoming selfless is communism. So when he's calling his girlfriend and asking, where are you? And she says, I am here. So he asks again, where is here for you? Because for me, here is here. Now he has to change the definition of here. Because for him, her here is there. So he tries to change, it's just about all the jokes coming together and very much of the lingual play. But he says, now your definition of here is my definition of here. It's no more there for me. This is how they emerged. This is how the form of love and feminism emerged for Badiou. It's amazing reading. You want me to take one or two of it? Maybe, yeah. So,
Let's do the next one. But I vote for nothing one.
okay, cool. Okay. Now, this is one of the play. If anyone wants to read, there are two characters. One is Ahmed, and another one is Mustache, which is one of the fastest person in the French country. And there is a conversation between them two. Anyone wants to read the Ahmed and Mustache?
Volunteers, because it was so good when we had to do.
Yeah.
I renounce my Ahmadness.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. Okay.
So someone else be Ahmed.
Anyone wants to play Mustache?
I'll take Moustache.
Yeah. I was. That was obvious one.
Was it? How embarrassing.
Just saying about Mustache.
Okay, then you think that's wrong.
You're the only person, right? Yeah. Ahmed and Mustache. Okay. Ahmed is talking to people and Mustache.
No, but Ahmed is not Ahmed anymore. Ahmed has become there.
Ahmed is still there, isn't it? He is both.
He's both.
But someone give us an Ahmed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go. People, my dear Mustache, just tell them who I am. Me.
There's no you. There's just all of you. You're in all of you. All of you immigrators from all over the world, the Orientals, and all those who come from Africa, them who are gobbling up all the welfare money, them on account of who we don't have any more work. Not even sweeping the street. Go back.
Take it easy, Fatso. So I'm not someone?
You're all a bunch of less than nothings.
The stick isn't nothing. When nothing has a stick, it's something.
And then his swirls just stick back and comes towards Mustache. You want to see the aftermath? So you might find that this is a collision point. They will be fighting against each other furiously. See how Ahmed handles the situation. Ahmed says nothing is like 0 Celsius. Above 0 it's hot, below 0 it's freezing. I'm less than nothing. I'm freezing, but you are frozen one. And suddenly the temperature drops. Mustache says, now he is beyond nothing, right? Ahmed is particularly okay in this situation. Mustache become a lump of ice and Ahmed can easily break it with a stick. That's how the play ends. Bit of abstraction. Ahmed uses his thinking stick. The point being made towards this end is that you don't have to use violence to end any vicious cycle. You have to find the ruptures within the society, within those domains. One of it is laughter that he finds, and he deals with that situation using his tools and his ideas of thinking. That's all.
Thank you. So I think before we go on to the riots, which is what Liz is going to do, it would be quite good just to have your thoughts on what Badiou is saying, particularly about nothing. That in Rebound history, he calls it the inexistence, which is the people who do not exist, at least in the eyes of the nation, in the eyes of the fascists or whoever. So that was the nothing thing. But the nation is also that a sort of concept, an infinite concept that once you have it, you stay stuck within it, you're going to be always coming back to this problem of who's in and who's out and so on.
Okay, so he says you're less than nothing, so then the joke is about under 0 is still something.
Yeah.
That's why we're talking about freezing.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm trying to process. Okay, the guy told him you guys are less than nothing, and then he says, but under nothing, less than nothing, and temperature is still something.
So he
like it freezes.
there is a possibility that there could be a quarrel between these two. There could be a fight between these two. He takes it as a joke and says, if you say I'm less than nothing, he cracks that joke on a temperature suddenly to change the context. He changes the context totally. If someone says you are a motherfucker, he just asks whose mother. He does not take it on person. So he just deviates it with a laughter, and he uses his stick, the idea of thought and force together, to smash them. It's sort of essence of his philosophy, nicely adapted in a play.
I like the mustache collapse is beautiful. Well, Ahmed wants to see himself. I like that line a lot.
Part I think he might be saying is an idea that comes from Richard Rorty, American philosopher, about redescription. If you re-describe the world, you can literally change it. So he's taken those words that were demeaning or rendering nothing, and he's turned them and turned them into something which has power. In this case, to actually make himself collapse and Ahmed to prevail. It's a tiny example of what Rorty suggests is you can do that at any scale. You can re-describe, and with re-description, you can actually change material reality and the way people
I just thought about the concept of people being the unseen, the non-existent. And I just thought it's linked to the revolution and the intuition he talked about. I think maybe the intuition or the actions that the non-existent taking is to make them seen, and how he said that it shouldn't be always aimed with violence. And it takes a lot of mental and intellectual courage and power, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe if I may, I can share my own story a bit.
Yeah.
So I had this abuser kind of stepfather, and we lived under his wife many years, and like I did a lot of actions against him, right, which caused many dramas in the family and all. And I think like just after many years, I realized that none of us are going from this family. We are living together, right? So last summer we had this. My younger sister got married, and I just decided to because the environment was awkward, and I wanted to everybody happy, and I suddenly decided to invite that man to dance with me. After 15 years. So I
Totally
just thought
changed.
about that moment, thinking to this and how he was treating us with his power over against us, and how I wanted to make peace, but I know that I can't use any violence, or I know our power imbalance, right? So the action form I have chosen was kind of this situation made me, also pushed me to think creatively to make that peace, and I think in that case I chose dance, and which brought us, especially to me and for my mom, I think the most peace and liberation. And after 15 years, now even I can share it with 3 sentences, but it's it took my half of my life.
Wow. It's really inspiring. Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And the whole idea of this thought, if we go to the core of the philosophy, it is about reconstruction, isn't it? Putting the world order in a different language, in different terms, and just rethinking it. Not playing with the rules of those who want you to play with their rules, but tweaking the rules, bringing them to the place of unruly, and there you can play with them instead of getting played by them. That's really amazing example.
That is an amazing.
Yeah.
I had a question. I think for me, when I read this, and even from what I understand here, I feel like this is where the politics in my country is going, and honestly, I find it very pointless. I'm being very honest. There's a lot of reclamation of language, and there is a desire to be witnessed by the oppressor, and I don't know what that leads to. This is also my bias, where I think at some point you just need violence for things to move ahead. Like it doesn't happen through this. So I think that's my question. Like, is that a fair critique, or am I not understanding this theory correctly? Because I see it in like reclamation of words like slut, or reclamation of words like cure. We just keep reclaiming words and language has power. But what with that? They find a new word, right? They create new language of their own.
Yeah.
So they are also reclaiming power. Their kind of power, right? The other side. So what then? Like, do we just keep doing this? Do we just keep recreating language? Because in my context, I don't see it shifting material reality, except for giving me or my community a momentary sense of we did something, but nothing material actually changed.
And just to build on that, I feel like sometimes when we're trying to do this kind of thing to either deflect or disarm a possible moment of conflict, I feel like that you risk losing momentum on like mass participation sometimes, because it takes a lot to mobilize people into action, and then when things start to stir something up, and then you sort of try to I don't know, be witty about it, do you then lose impact? Like, I mean, like blunt force impact. Sorry, that's a violent phrasing, but I don't know how else to explain it.
Maybe I can just bring this in a very right time to bring it. These are the 3 poems written by one of my friends critiquing, thinking about philosophy of Badiou on the same lines. So we know the quotation by Marx that, which is in the background, the philosophers have only tried to interpret the world in different aspects. However, the point is to change it. And what she thinks is Badiou is doing this: I am dissatisfied with the old interpretations of the new world. Those are either inadequate or wrong. Let me interpret it in another way. Or, since I cannot change the world anymore, I'll interpret it, the ongoing efforts of the changing world, and I'll just try to, listen to my advice, reiterate this. So one of the critique of Badiou, which you said, of this theory is valid critique, and it is what is happening throughout the world where we think of the party or the state structure. You will see when the state is oppressive and you're not fighting against them, do you have really any other option? That's the basis point. Like, people think that if we are using the philosophy that Badiou uses of love and everything against an oppressor who is in the entities like state and party, do we really have any other option other than violence? In his own life, Badiou has given few examples where he has invested in this as a movement, created movement out of these points, which he calls as a historic riots as well. He has been invested in this movement since 70s. In the very recent movement that he was in was the Yellow Vest movement, where you do not fetishize the people who have been oppressing against the state. In the particular context of India that you brought, which is there, in the case when Muslims were denied rights of citizenship under one of the law, the way Badiou was adapted across different theatres, which there is also one link to it, is they are changing the definition of what the constitution says Indians are. The same argument that was used in the court, which was later on used by the court to stop these laws which were never enacted then. So the philosophy of the language is not only there on the ground, but all the form of oppression erupts from the language. That's what postmodernists think. And to this domain, you can actually deal with these ideas, fight with these ideas using the nuanced tools. What we intend to do with the violence is what Badiou calls a fetishization of bodies. And he's essentially against that idea. If you're trying to play with rules of their game, you have to build the state and the party when you go into the violence. He does not oppose it. Ahmed himself says, the stick that I have is of thought and of force. When this guy freezes, he hits him, smacks with his stick. So he is using force, but he is not fetishizing it. He is not killing him. He is not using him, but he is changing the rule of the game. That he is making it in some sort of ice, which is probably taking things out of the context, out of that bad infinity, out of that vicious cycle, and rephrasing it in his terms. Uh, with a very practical example, just last bit, when the workers were on strike, in the past the workers were killed in France. The way Badiou and all these communist circles adapted them was creating workshops for these workers who are wearing yellow vests. They had trained them of how to be there. Maybe the last one that we have seen about the clown army as well. How to be there, still you opposing the state, but in very different form, and to the form that they cannot execute you anymore. Their violence just becomes nothing, and you become existent at that point. This is the whole idea of it. So,
I guess, yeah, I feel like my mind is being
sorry for that.
pulled in a lot of different directions.
Yes.
Sorry if this doesn't make sense, but I think what I'm reflecting on what we're saying about, like, it reminds me of the weapons of the weak thing, and sort of when you're in such oppressive conditions, like the double nature of valuing certain acts of, right, maybe joking against your oppressor, joking against the immigration officer, like maybe the impact overall for the movement is small, but for that person, in that moment, it takes a lot of courage even just to make a joke in front of an officer, and I think it is important. Maybe, I don't know, because even impact is a loaded word, right? Even impact, we're thinking of it in a very, it's like a rule of the oppressor impact as well, right? So I guess what I'm saying is I do feel like it is important to think of, like, maybe for that person reclaiming the word slut or something makes a big difference, even if for the movement as a whole, like, there's different levels of gaining power. Maybe it just gives power within to one person and it doesn't create, like, change for the oppressor. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud here.
No, what I was thinking is that there's also different repertoire, I guess. Whatever you were trying to achieve, if you think about it, not only social movements, organizations, but personal thing. It depends on a lot of things in the result that you want, and what you are willing to risk in the process, I guess, also. And sometimes violence, quote unquote violence, is necessary. Sometimes it would only make it messier. Sometimes something symbolic is so much powerful than that. So it all depends. I don't think it's just one thing over the other. And I think we remember historically things that have been symbolic and peaceful, and that had a really big impact in the world till today. And vice versa with other things. So I do think that it will depend on a lot of things, and you can't, or we can't just say this is good, this is bad, this is not going to be able to transform, or this is the best way to do it. I think it depends a lot on the context, and I will say something. I remember 4 or 5 years ago, in the presidential elections in Costa Rica, the second round of presidential election in Costa Rica, when the president, the candidate, the one won that way, a lot of people were saying there was fraud, and they were going to, yes, fraud in the election. So they were going to do whatever and take on the presidential house and the tribunal, or the electorate tribunal, or whatever, court. And I remember someone told me, like, "Ale, we need to do something because this is going to get out of control."
control. We need to have a lot of people there so we can confront them. We have, and I was not. My thinking was this is going to be terrible. It's going to be worse. So what I said at the moment, and I talked to a lot of friends, like we can go and we're going to leave anonymous notes and flowers into the stairs of the court, the electoral court in Costa Rica, with thank you notes. We left 2 or 3 in the like at 2 a.m. But by 9 a.m. it was all covered in thank you notes, and it was in the news and everything. And they didn't do anything about it. They couldn't. How can you go there and destroy? We kind of did something that took them out of their comfort zone, I guess, and stopped what they were trying to do that day. So it will depend on a lot of things.
Yes. You want to get a break or session?
Yeah. Are you satisfied? And we'll do more of criticizing after we've looked at the riots. Because we've still got, and then we look at the events. We can also come back to what you were saying about.
I just want to say that I actually agree with that. To me, I felt like, and that's why I wanted clarification. Like, is this where we stop, or do we just think of this as one of the options, right? Like, of course, like there are many contexts. To me, a personal event is often something like this, because we exist in very unsafe ecosystems, and we can't like be violent against an oppressor. But when I read it, I don't know, I felt like the theory was saying this is the way to do it, and that I disagree with. It has its place, it has its context, but it can't be prescriptive as well to what someone who's actually doing it needs. That's all. But I do agree with this.
Great.
Yeah. Let's go. 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
5 minutes.
10 minutes.
You can have 10 more minutes.
Bob was saying that it has to be done to later.
I feel like the theory focuses a lot on reclamation constantly in different ways, right? And this is also like my essay topic is like is after a point only reclamation a form of submission. That's what I say. But what?
I'm already writing.
I'm not really sure.
Okay, go ahead.
So one of the things that stick to the reason for the facilitation of it was anyway. We're talking about is it upstaging a transport communicate what to avoid temporary emotional of talking about how unjust or hostile is. Are you dominating that, or are you saying or is that anarchy? Who decides? How do you, what again? I don't know what I do. It's something I think about often.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that was one. Okay. And then the second was the that's the word disability and the importance of that word as to what is and is not considered as what is disabled, what is or is not economic illness, what is or is not chronic pain. I know that this is not an obviously political word. Yeah. When I see yeah, you get me. So I don't know which one I like. So it really is nice to substance. Really knows what literature that exists or that I found to meet.
I think what I'm interested in I've got more energy out of the first one. I know when you spoke to me about this idea. Even my development, but I was worried that he gave me the allyship. It had ways of doing it. So because one of the topics, I had two topics. One I know very well because that was actually the first one. But in terms of the plastic value supply chain, the way the other one was the other one was right to public space and the right to leisure for like and then you can throw it on stuff. But you're not required to class and then you sort of said I don't tell me all theory. So you pay a bit obviously. But what we're looking for is it's going well. Should already get on the I can use what I can share and I might also want to wow. In a good possibility. Their comments I stand on that. Actually, I Japanese. In which case, they don't mind. I mean, what are they also doing? Good luck with everything. Household still, it's still cooperates and coexists now, even after how many years.
Just manage
you can take figures and you can engage it with the ambiguity literature. Well, just actually but you would have enough already to one of your papers is victim, what do we say? Try to think and what kind of you're having the same thing as one height. So you've got a lot of material from other parts of the on the other case. Yeah. With that
so with the disability thing, there is part of the larger, actually, what's my application specific question actually that keeps coming up. I I find the politics of euthanasia very ableist, yes. Because you're not considered terminally ill enough or of sound mind to make a decision to be euthanized because it's not you're not sane enough to make such a permanent decision. Versus that option becomes I don't know, available. Do you want money someday? If the affliction or the nature of the pain is not physical, more visible. So again, it's like very so I have like the
don't actually think, I don't like to think of it as I find it very, but the only thing there is that it's taking this course, you've been giving some of the infinite, not infinite, but very large range of different sort of challenges to lunacy. Yes. And the question we would have with that is, which theorist could we put at the centre? If you can't find
7 p.m.
if we ever find one, then we've got to go searching like what you can do. I mean, that would give
we have no time, and I don't have
we don't have the time to make sense. Having said that, the actual presence is of extreme importance. So I'm just thinking, if we think through who we do have, does anybody,
If we put together, that's
just if you go to
I want that camera in
you think about their life,
for you.
you think about the removal of you bias the person who is valid because they have this sort of ability to use that. Right. Disability stuff in
You have points there, like
do distribution sensible, which is I was realistically this becomes acceptable for the human being. And this doesn't actually within our rules, I think we must know. We need to if you're not existing on the right to then say I'm
yes, there's actually one.
recommend one striking me hard. You didn't actually do it. You mentioned he's there, he's not far off, he's not really this. He's down good.
I'm getting there.
So, what you said about you is and I really care about
I'm beyond stressed. So I look home.
and I have some of the building blocks for it, so I
feel like that's good.
and then you'll say, okay, I'm going to spend this many days.
The thing is,
And you'll think this is the color red I want you to be doing.
And I also wanted to ask, I actually asked for this application of
just like picking apart the elements of that conversation for disabled about arguments in favor of critically disagree or something like that.
Oh my God. Yes, I was always very pro.
Justice.
I really because I think sometimes you're like, oh my God. Too busy to
There's never enough time. Yeah. Such as a reader's interpretation. Some really good examples
but we did actually realise that you can just do it
very well. Yeah, very well.
I think someone else
She's back in the UK. Good few weeks. We had a lovely week away in Turkey. Went to the centre of Cappadocia. It's a really spectacular region. Limestone geology. Really cool. And very interesting history. Lots of periods of settlement.
So where do I end up?
Yeah. It's lovely to go. I'm in Istanbul and head back with all the bags. So nice. Which is fairly minimalist, but not quite as far as I am. So it's been a period of adjustment moving in, moved all the furniture around several times. Talk of repainting. At least until after August, you know.
This series is not
Yeah. Why don't you play with it? I'll continue.
Okay. I will try to.
You're like, yeah. Because if you say
Yeah. I've only lived in London for 8 months. I'm starting to feel this could be home for quite a long time. So much going on. And yes, the parlour is just I'm happy. It's been really enjoyed it so far.
I'll be honest,
Yeah, I'm chef.
So like it's next week.
Keeping busy, paying rent. I have home passion. I've done that bit earlier. It was nice to be able to get something part-time. No, part-time course, so I'll be back next year. To do my dissertation next year. So this year, I've got the essay for this and the novel that I did in the early part of the term. Yeah, it's very nice. It's a much nicer pace.
oh, that's why you're okay.
So chill. Yeah, I've only got 2 essays. Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know.
No dissertations to worry about.
Sure. You know what you might be working on? I was gonna ask you if you what would
Yeah, nothing. Probably something democratic processes. That's my area.
that's not lost at all.
No, yeah. I'll focus on some areas.
No, what you have
Yeah, exactly.
I
Okay, come on, around. Let's get back to it.
People ready? So in the Rebirth of History, there he talks in depth about the different types of riots as an event. So first of all, he talks about the immediate riot, which is just sort of gangs, hooligans, thieves. It's clashes with law and order, but it's very random, and it's rage with no purpose, and it's often carried out by the young, located in a very specific territory. It might be a looting, so it's violence, but on a very small, narrow nature. So an example of this was the start of one of the Brixton riots, and this was against the police and attacks by the youth by using petrol bombs, paving stones, and this is what we probably describe as a latent riot. The problem with these 3 types of riot is that often they'll start off as one and then move into another one. So it's all very good having categories, but as we know in social sciences, categories are always like blurry. So what we're going to do for this is, in your table groups, so if you're in pairs or in a big group, that's fine. I want you to either use the example that I've chosen, or come up with one of your own and think of a symbol of an immediate riot, and then we'll go on to the other two as well, of that immediate riot, in the form of image theatre. So I want you to create it with your bodies and like with each other. So yeah, I want you to think about that symbol, and you've got 10 minutes, and we're going to do that across 3 riots. So this is the first one. So the immediate riot, I'll go back to it.
Symbol of an immediate riot. So think we're an actual riot that you can talk about together. If you know one. And if you feel isolated on a temple, go and join them.
Yeah.
One riot is
You leaving or arriving? Having you back. Image theatre of an immediate
It began as a really or you can use it stripped away.
How non-focused is the riot need to be? Just justify it, just a bit of waffle on this one. Okay. I'm thinking I'm thinking the Colston statue something in Bristol. Yeah.
I think it could be anything.
Create it.
Who's the statue?
The statue.
The guy who just suggested.
So. Symbolic. There's a guy called Edward Colston, C-E-O-L-S-T-O-N, in Bristol, which is he was a slave trader, and Bristol was a big slave trade. There've been long campaigns to legitimate political statue removed.
All of us
Lots of road names, theatres, his name and other slave trading and none of those legitimate avenues for being successful. They always passed down, like, not the right time, wrong councillor in charge.
Yeah, but in immediate riot.
I just feel like
Previously, there's been a campaign, which roads was forward. Another British and Oxford College, I can't remember which one. Yeah, the whole thing.
Symbols of prestige.
Rhodesia.
Because so much
And this was sort of trying to follow in a similar vein. So Rose's Fort was very where he was sort of forced to be more unruly because any legitimate avenue had been blocked. So when the moment ends, because that's when in the following months, the four people who were accused of having done this vandalism, this crime, were acquitted by
our immediate rights by nature really small.
they dredged the statue out now and put it in a museum like a
And then in some ways, students fought back. They wanted to prevent.
Okay, let's make it
Bristol
Okay, so
Museum
you're making
started the process of
acknowledging
acknowledging
they're
all
proposing for
slavery,
how many
free
slaves
nature
were
roads,
the
theatres,
public
and other
Last long. How did this long come up?
With our board.
Oh. And if someone from the first batch,
How would we
I didn't do it.
something happens,
There's still so much.
just
really
three would be
interesting.
language.
Like down to aristocratic families who are still MPs and reading something about current Tory.
They're invisible.
Yeah.
You're being recognized, then you're allowed. People know. If you live there, you
Because
can
they did huge
It's not like I don't know.
Sorry, the riot.
Yeah, I was wondering
How immediate it was. That's why I asked about language.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe this
Maybe the
Out of consideration as a theory.
What about
Yeah, too. Or if it's spread, it's just
Oh wow.
Yeah, it wasn't
Yes.
And she doesn't really know, so she makes a corner. But so you had to because the work to take riots. And I need people follow you.
But why not? She looks more like
But I think I don't know what that is.
Gently.
I mean, they're really trying to channel the energy of the
No.
Were you?
Yeah.
Why should I be the statue?
No, I wasn't there. No.
Why couldn't we use something?
An inanimate object.
You're allowed by me. What is
Okay, so big throng crowd of people all around the statue, ropes on the statue, pulling. Eventually the statue falls down, and then everyone gathers around, rolling it, and they push it.
It has to be like an image.
No, I'm just
You can do it once and make another one. Think of it like crossing all things. Okay. You would be like surprised like she's gonna die. I would be like she's gonna die.
Oh wow, look at this, look at the statue.
Oh, here we go. Yay.
No, I'm fine.
Can we give it a face?
No, you say okay.
Nice Hitler face.
What matters to my image is just
He's
what
put
people
his hands in
Okay,
first.
let's try this. Because I'm not gonna say
Okay.
kibble. It's just like we just pretend we're just like taking the steps. Just other two of us are like shaking hands at the stage. You can only make one mistake.
I can, but I haven't
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Stick figures as well.
Yeah, they're good as well. They're just discussing how they're going to do it. I think you should be about ready.
I think the second one. So the second time we just do some other thing,
Yeah, and then I was thinking for the other one we could like write down maybe like a few key words rather than making a single like the key symbolising words. Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, it might not sound like that. Hang on. I just remember being a friend of mine who was sort of he was a guy that was living in a feminist household, all women, they had a really brutal family, they were rich. And he was involved in this, and he threw a brick at a police stop, and he got arrested. And I just remember him saying he didn't feel it was this moment of exhilaration where it just made total sense to throw this brick at the police.
Sometimes. We did, so actually what really inspired me to the job in history and talking to a really incredible she's like a history lecturer and oh my goodness, really inspiring. All of that module with your yeah, all the unions and everything. Yeah, it was so we could win say that mine first time was I think that's quite strong now. But you hope it was.
Come on, everyone, let's go.
Okay, so shall we?
Shall we stop in group? So to do it one by one. We want to do like two just give a very short summary about what you decided to do.
Sure. Okay. This is the toppling of the Colston statue in Bristol, which was 2 years ago now? I don't know. Recently. This is Edward Colston. He was a slave trader, a horrible person. The people of Bristol have been campaigning for a long time via lots of legitimate avenues to get the statue removed and lots of things renamed in the city to no avail, made no difference. So eventually, following George Floyd's murder and the Black Lives Matter protests that erupted out of it, the movement in Bristol gathered, there was a big riot, they removed the statue and they chucked it in the canal, which is what we're about to recreate.
Are you excited? Thank you. We will remove the statue.
No, yeah, you can write out. I don't want you to be stressed before.
No.
Yeah.
Wow.
We will stop the post because this is tough for India. You can stop by now. Okay. So basically, we picked the Anti-Citizenship Amendment Act, right? Yeah. And we thought about how the Amendment Act basically tried to remove citizenship rights from a lot of citizens of the country. And we thought about how a riot is a passageway or a bridge for the same person to move from a place where they're subjugated to injustice to a place of justice, because we saw justice as a means to an end and not the end itself. So we're meant to be the same people over the bridge that was India. Wow. Good job.
So meta.
And finally, do you guys want to say that?
You have to
Okay.
Shall we present first or who's first?
Explain first.
Explain first.
I don't know. Explain first.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, Jasmine. So we're going to try and recreate something that is quite common in the favelas. What happens, like immediate riots happen a lot when a territory is disrespected and is controlled by a specific faction. So here we have on one side one faction and on the other side another faction, and this is like an invisible frontier, something that separates which part of the territory is controlled by which. And Naomi is a researcher that is allowed to be in my territory for this side of the region, and she's going to unintentionally cross and cause a reaction from the other side. That is
I don't recognize the border.
yeah, because the borders are invisible. Like you don't, only people who are from there will know which parts of like the favela, the neighborhood is controlled by which faction.
I'm going.
Ready?
It is a great interview. Thank you so much for your cooperation. This one is also nice. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. We're not character you guys. I want to wear.
That's it.
Awesome, thank you. So the next riot, we're going to move on. Yeah.
The example of the statue, considering that, I don't know, I mean, is it immediate?
So that's one of the critiques of this, is the fact that it was an immediate event, an immediate reaction, but it was probably something part of like a much bigger thing, which is a historical riot, which we're going to go talk about. So that is one of the biggest critiques, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more.
Thank you.
But I think the immediate, like, getting it done, I don't think it was thought out that they were gonna, today we're gonna get up and we're gonna put that statue in there. I think it was like a bit of a last minute thing. So the next kind of riot is a latent riot, and this is kind of like an in-between one. So it's quite a larger scale riot, but it doesn't create this new politics in which a historical riot would. It creates different subjectivities, different thoughts, but there's not this like mass change of discourse. And as opposed to doing image theatre for time's sake, I just want you to try and think of an example and have a discussion about this. We've got a couple. So I've got the Indian farmers' protest and
This is the part of the same protest where the farmers had taken over the KFC stores and renamed it as Kisan meets Farmer Food Corner. So they had actually taken over all the KFC buildings and started giving out free pizzas to everyone within them. Yeah.
So if you want to have like a little discussion about any in your own context or any problems with this idea of a latent riot, and then we'll come back and reconvene.
Can you go back to the slide with the features?
So it's a much bigger riot than just an immediate sort of reaction. If that makes sense. So any ideas? Any examples?
Black Lives Matter.
Do you want to have like a few minutes to discuss it in your groups?
I was thinking I want to ask you like how you say like very stay organized. I mean like it involves a lot of same backing and yeah, but like if you're also single you just within that, yeah. Is that great? It's kind of when Riot has the like the backend influence of the stage. There will be actors, generally like against a certain
minority groups.
so it's not a riot in the sense of like when they happen, it's meant to happen. And then there are people who kind of take advantage of that. Where they are
Make use of our generic consciousness.
No. That's like the extent of my theater abilities.
Usually like rounding up of
For context,
religious minority.
yeah, context if you're stated
No, it's not related to the World Cup. It's just like situating myself.
so that's right. Can go after this. So that's the point. Yeah. The reason I ask is because we refer to a lot of violence, problems as riots, but they're actually yeah. Sometimes there's always like an event that kind of sparks it, but then it is kind of to kind of ensure that the violence is spread and it is directly it used to very much in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, without any very much against minority in Sri Lanka. And now we have had more examples of that kind of riot that is against Muslims.
Because how words see, like they can see what we like when it says anger and strife and
yeah.
maybe it was on maybe the
I'm not on whether the state involvement negates it. It's not. It's not historical. It's not creating a paradigm.
It's not unique either because it's not reasoning on anything that kind of comes to like things like back in India. This geography, 1 kilometer will take a march. Right? And this is my personal story. Like that bit of how this should happen. I think that doesn't fit in right now. Even that password, it's space that is given. It's not space that you take. So we need the outcome is that will lead to try. Because and no one's doing their culture. It is so large that it has the potential to change narrative, but it doesn't change something material. Yeah.
That would be more immediate. As it were, the whole idea of latency is the problem itself. No. Not ready. The problem itself is becoming more
Okay. So one of the example that we thought of was is the protest in Iran about the hijab, where there is conversation, there is a change in the subjectivities, but no formal change in usual politics. But I think towards the end, something that also came up was how long of what is the lifetime of a riot before it is considered as not having created change in politics? Because, like, for example, the farmers' protest went on for a really long time, and it could be argued that it didn't happen immediately, but the three laws were sort of repealed or taken down. I don't know what the word is. So, is it then not a success? I don't know the word is. I don't know what is the word. Successful? No. If I am.
Oh no.
I guess the things about the word, what was it, like affecting a change in politics or something? I don't remember what it was the quote exactly. And then subjectivity change, like how do you measure? Like maybe it did affect formal politics, but it didn't really affect subjectivities, or maybe it did affect subjectivities. Like it's hard to say.
I think personally, my understanding is that like the historical brightness, so the one that we're about to talk about, is a complete rupture. It's like this openness of space, and it's a very short-term thing. Whereas this is to do with politics, it's to do with subjectivity. There's not this like massive open space, because when there is such an open space, that's not sustainable. Whereas in this example, it has been sustained. But that was sort of my explanation.
But definitely the fact that the farmers' protest eventually, after a long time, produced changes in the law means that it was working within the existing political structure. So it made some adjustments to the law, but it didn't change the nature of the relationship between the powerful and the weak, or the owners of property and everybody else, and all of those things. So in that sense, it's a latent riot because it is very powerful, but it doesn't do that fundamental rupture thing that you're talking about, which is changes the nature of relations, and the sort of feeling of having. You go back to your farm, you may have some subsidy or whatever it is, but you're still in the same position.
You're just not in a worse off position.
You're not in a worse off position, thank goodness.
Could you be in a worse off position after it and it would still be a latent trial?
Yeah.
A less worse off.
If the politics sort of persist and then more oppression.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Less of a illegal situation.
It's like this idea that if you had a rupture, and we'll go on to this, it doesn't necessarily produce positive changes to the structure. You may end up with just different dynamics of power. Did you have an example?
I mean, we're not sure.
Okay.
But we can just share what we discussed.
Yes.
We discussed the Women's March in Washington DC, the Me Too movement. We spoke of Banksy's art, and looting and writing after the Black Lives
I mean, it was more the generic question more than an example. We were trying to understand if programs that are like the state backing mean that something is not a latent, right? Like if there's involvement and so we're trying to understand certain things related rights, but can it be a latent right if there is also a lot of backing from the state towards the people carrying it out? Like, is a program a latent right, or is it a right when there's been information being passed around and protection offered to people who are taking part in it? Is that a latent right, or is that just yeah.
That's a really interesting question. Did you hear it over there? If there's a pogrom, is that a latent riot? If there is, for example, the state or authorities of some sort or other supporting and protecting one part of the population to do something terrible.
I think in a way the state always, unless it's a rupture, always have some kind of play in it.
Sure.
And whether that's manipulating certain parts of it, I don't know. There's ever no certain right that doesn't have certain parts.
Sure. Okay.
But I'm also, am I misunderstanding this in, and this was also something that came up earlier, but are we looking at riot as resistance when we're talking about riot in like unruly politics? Or are we talking, because a pogrom is necessarily state-sponsored violence, right? So if we're talking about riot as resistance, then it doesn't qualify.
I'm assuming there could be lots of events that build that latency required for writing, right? Like things that hurt the conscience of people, get them activated. Maybe that's not a latent riot.
No, it's the activator. You're right. Yes. It's not the riot. So the pogrom is the thing that is being maybe rioted against later.
Yeah.
But the pogrom is actually better dealt with by being the dance in terms of the construction of the state out of violence. And I don't think a pogrom is a. However, you do get Badiou does mention a sort of dissatisfaction of the population. For example, the raid on Capitol Hill, whenever it was 2 years ago. Those people who stormed the Capitol in Washington DC that time, they had real grievance. They felt like they were being made inexistent, and they needed to make that point. And then the other half of the population said, "What are you doing? You're doing wrong." And so, in that sense, yes, that they were part of an immediate riot and that lot. But when it's a state-sponsored thing, you're basically it's the tools of what Badiou calls capitalism and so on that are being deployed to maintain a state of power.
If what if it is not a program, like if it is not state sponsored, But if it was, like, I know we're all speaking from the side of being on the left side of politics, but what if someone on the right did this? Because in India we've had governments who were on the left, and then you had the RSS build up over years. So if they are right-wing, would they also fall within similar theory?
Yeah, and I wanted to give an example, maybe like the overtaking of the Capitol in the US.
Yeah.
2 years ago, by the Trump people. Yeah. Like,
That's what I was thinking. So that is, I would say that was an immediate riot. I would say the Brexit vote in the UK was a form of immediate stroke latent. You know, it's you know, you've been ignoring us all these years. We're going to tell you exactly what we do.
Can I share this example from South Korea, which what does it call? Which removed their president. Unfortunately, the unveiled first female president was removed after like 5-6 months of like people striking the street. And but like according to activists from South Korea, what they're saying is that that event was result of this 6 years of small events against the corruption and big corporations in the country, which started from students' protest that in the university's street, students started putting banners against the system, and police came and took down those banners, and students went to the street, and of course police came, and parents get angry, and that kind of seemed being questioned at those times. And after sometimes, like because when some event happened in the public, I think that alarmed the society, right? People, get some spark. Yeah. Spark. Yeah. From if something happens for justice, I think that gives a spark for the people who are feeling injustice, right? So that student thing happened 6 years ago, and that resulted in many small events after that, and those were like snowballing together. And 6 years later, that female president corruption and thing happened, and just one people, I don't know how many million people came to the main street and took down the president.
But the impeachment of this president, from what I hear, sounds like they were on the right. The president was on the right.
Even though.
So that I still don't know the answer to your question. I'm just curious. Sorry.
I don't know. It was a question, just example.
No, thank you.
Like, just does this theory only apply to a certain type of politics?
My point is that it could be right wing or left wing. The point being that it's somewhere within your immediate riot is just fury. Your latent riot is an expression of discontent, which is very broad in society. It's bigger than just one group. And on the other hand, it's still within the law. So it could be right wing or left wing. That's not the issue. It's just the fact that you get these multiple events. One leads to another. They connect in geography. They connect in time. But they're never completely kind of overturning anything. But they're an expression of growing discontent.
Finally, historical riot, and this is complete rupture. It is basically where the inexistent become existent. It's they stir up and alter political possibilities, and there's three things spoken about. Localization, so it's beyond just the riot, it's beyond national borders. You can get people across the world that are sympathetic with it. It's contradiction, and it's intensification, and yeah, so they are complete moments they're very different to the immediate and the latent riots. So an example of this that we had come up with is the revolution, the Egyptian revolution. So this time, I think, again due to time, I want you to consider. Yeah, go for it.
I think we have someone here who should be able to talk to us a little bit about it.
No.
Do you have anything you want to say about it? Do you feel it was a historical riot?
Yeah, it is. It's a historical moment. Like, things are defined like post-revolution, pre-revolution. So
Things are defined in Egypt post-revolution and pre-revolution. That's really an important thing. Yeah.
It's just too painful. Yeah.
That's important too. You say it's too painful.
Yeah, because it was not successful. Like it was a defeated revolution. So
Can I ask, in the sort of build up to it,
yeah,
were there kind of expectations for the aftermath of it, like
for those.
for like going into it, the looking at sort of what would happen after? Were there sort of key things that people wanted, like unification, the takedown of a regime? What were people demanding post-revolution?
So people were saying عيش حرية عدالة اجتماعية كرامة إنسانية which bread freedom, social justice and human dignity.
And
Human dignity. So that's like the slogans and the shouts from the protest, and it was like one of the demands was to bring down the regime. So yes, there was that.
So it was like the inexistent having more freedoms and becoming existent in a way, like taking back the power.
Dignity. Would you say that was existence for the inexistent? Bread, freedom, and dignity.
Yeah. And social justice.
Badiou says that Westerners misinterpreted it as being a call for the sort of freedom that you have to consume different kinds of breakfast, multiple coffee shops, and
We love our shows.
whereas he's suggesting that what was being called for was pure existence, goodness, cooperation, dignity, all of those things. Hence, the idea that it's historical because it's
Okay, so the regime, the Mubarak's regime that was overthrown, things were getting bad. Like it was bad, it was getting horrible and horrible. Torture was becoming, I don't know, like the default, the default behavior of police and state security and so on. Like we became a place that like torture is being outsourced to Egypt. So other countries who cannot or who will get a lot of rights and protests from their citizens about that would send them to Egypt. So that's one thing. And in parallel to that was that there was the government was trying to make some changes, were facial changes to a more democratic thing. It looks like that, but in fact it is not. So in 2005 there was a constitutional referendum to move the presidential elections from just like one candidate and to say yes or no to a multi-candidate. So it looked, like more democratic, but it was made in a way to make it only possible for the president's son to be a candidate. You have to be, your party has to be established for that many years. You have to be in a high position in your party for that. So in the end, it's just moving power to the president. And there was a lot of corruption. So bread is about, like minimum wages. It's just the basic thing, not the different types of bread. And a lot of the protests that were in 2010 that kind of led to that moment were about a young man in Alexandria called Khalid Said. He was beaten and tortured to death because he was in an internet cafe and they wanted to see ID, and then they started saying that he has drugs and stuff like that. And he was your typical, typical middle class guy, not related to any politics. So from there, it started to be like there were some movements and protests that were different than the normal protests that were led by activists. These were led by more normal people. And then there was this part that happened in Tunisia, and it just went from there.
But what's important, it's all very important. The localization, the idea that Tahrir Square itself became symbolic of a nation of people who are saying we have had enough, and a sort of intensification of a sense of purpose, the dignity, the bread and the freedom, and down with the regime. So it was very clear what was being asked for. It wasn't just rage, neither was it a particular law. It was an entire political change. And what seems to me to be very important about it is the residue, which is why I didn't want to press you, but actually here at IDS, every year since 2011, we've had people from Egypt on our sources. And every year we have felt the, something of what they felt, and something of the mourning for, mourning as in feeling the loss of the possibility of something that was understood during those days there, whether you were in the square or whether you were just watching it and knowing about it. And that residue, that feeling of, yes, we lost it. First of all we had the army take over, then we voted, and we had the Muslim Brotherhood, and blah, blah, blah. There has been something which cannot be put back in the box again, which every one of those people who come to IDS has expressed, which is an understanding of the truth of power. The truth. Both the negatives of it, the enormous power of the state and the army, and all of those systems to pull things back into their favour, but also the understanding of what it means when you really do get dignity, when you really do get communism. This is Badiou's idea of love, people being together and being able to live together and cooperate and not have such a hierarchical, corrupt, whatever system. That was released in those days, and that's what makes it historical right. So even though you now have what you might call a worse political situation than before, you have also got an insight that the people of Egypt gave as a gift almost to everybody else by having to go through that.
So one thing that has completely changed is that the internal fear of individuals. Like you are poor and you could be beaten to death because
I don't know, that police officer just didn't like what you were doing or whatever. But since then, this has changed a lot, especially in younger people. Okay, we have a saying that, it's none of my business. We walk next to the wall, and it's young people don't say that. It's like, okay, it's not happening. They travel, they go out, but this acceptance of we have to live by the shadow of the wall is no longer. And I think also that moment has disrupted a lot of power dynamics, not just between the people and the government, but for example, I think from gender and development, planning to write about this in a way. I think the feminist movement or the women's movement has changed completely. It's also something because of that younger women have a different sense of how the world should be than before the revolution. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I think that's sort of, to sum it up, why it's called the rebirth of history. It's like this complete change of mindset. But there are a couple of so we've spoken about the Egyptian revolution as an event with a capital E, as a moment of rupture. However, it could be argued that both of these are also events with a capital E, that didn't necessarily have the desired rebirth of history, the unified, inexistent, becoming existent narrative that we've been speaking around, and that actually they've caused division and other things. So
I just want to now I think the planners of 9/11 might have thought of it as a rebirth of history, to be fair, so I think they actually might have not to think that the terrorists asked any, what's it called? Not to be a good thing, but I do think that if you read the Northern Al-Qaeda text leading up to it, they talk of rebirth in history, they talk about rupture, they talk about, so for them it was I think a critical event, and I think it was intentionally planned as such. I actually don't think the Manchester attack was as much. I used to study the text of Islamist groups. But I do think you could argue that from their point of view, it wasn't critical. And to say, it's interesting because it's different from the politics that it's unbearable, obviously. But I do think it was thought of.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, that one. Because it is actually true that people who were sort of designing it, as it were seeing themselves as liberators. And so there you go back to the question of your critical beginning. The sort of, if you have to revolt to the extent you have to be violent to overturn the current regime, your argument being that you're going to then create a whole new perfect world. Is that, can Badiou cope with this? Because he really does bring it back to that thing that people saw in Tahrir Square, which was, why are we being so peaceful here? Why did everybody, women, suddenly realise what it's like to be an ordinary human being instead of a woman who's sort of always having to take care of herself because she's vulnerable? All of those things. That whatever it was that a suicide bomber does or a 9/11 person does, it doesn't fit with Badiou's way of thinking, frankly. That their version is within what he would call everyday politics. So he would say, and then you take it into Veena land, where the state maintains its power through violence. And what it does is it uses violence to create markets, it uses violence to create justification. And Veena Das's work talks about how violence is a way in which the state co-opts from the individual or from the family or from even the community the sort of right to be the father and the mother and the sort of owner of when there is violence and when there isn't, when you can put someone in prison and when you can't, and all of those things, and that these critical events are when that's revealed in all its kind of glory, and in a sense 9/11 was a critical event which was stimulated by Bin Laden, but he's just playing part of the politics of the world. And then the imperialists go, right, hooray. They weren't saying hooray exactly, but they make a military industrial complex reaction out of it, which then fueled. Going back to the thing about where can we do our torture? Let's have an extra rendition place in Egypt. Let's do this. So that the production of a violent system of inequality and hierarchy is generated by people who find a way to use violence to maintain power and to take it away from who might otherwise be called the existing. I see you're looking, like you want to say something else.
Yeah, I'm not understanding this because I feel like whenever we're speaking of state violence, we think of state violence of a particular kind. But a lot of the other things that we are terming as unruly, like we're saying that violence is doing the politics of the state, right? But there are so many other ways in which the state is violent through very subtle means. And some of the unruly imaginations of reclamation are also just the other side of it. Be it through art, media, even things like clapping for a professional is a way to bring people together in a ritualistic act that makes them feel like a bigger part of something, right?
Yeah.
Or giving flowers to someone, things like that.
Yeah.
And a lot of unruly reclamation is that. So why is it that when it comes, it's not like I'm a very violent person, each of this disclaimer. Yeah, but I just feel like whenever we speak of state violence, we imagine it in a certain way, and that allows a lot of its everyday violence to remain hidden. Does that make sense?
Good point. To respond. Veena Das's thing is that critical events, they can actually belong to any group. So a community will take from families. They will take from them the sort of the power to become to say who's a hero and who's not a hero, and what kind of behaviour do you have if you're going to be heroic, and what kind of willingness do you have to submit to violence. Like she gives the example of Sati, throwing the women's being which necessarily just throw herself on her husband, dead husband, and feel on fire. That was something that was taken by the community, was the one who had adopted that as their power, and then the state takes that from them, and so her point about critical events is how ever larger sort of nexuses of power take the right to be violent and remove it from everybody else. So and these critical events, she says, change the politics, and they increase the kind of intensification of power away from individuals all the way up to either states or multinationals. In the case that she gives in her book about Bhopal, the back of the Union Carbide factory, the state develops power out of the suffering of the people, but so does Union Carbide. It increases its sort of legitimacy because we need batteries or whatever. So it gets to pay off the victims and at the same time become more powerful as a sort of capitalist construct. So that's Vedas' argument, and I think it's very interesting because it counters Badiou, but at the same time it's the opposite to the truth that Badiou is talking about. Badiou really is talking about peace. It really is talking about people being able to be together without any violence. Flowers or otherwise.
Yeah, that's an interesting point about like, why are we not saying this is a reclamation of the land? Like interesting. We're reclaiming that language. Then when it comes to violence, it's not we're reclaiming it, we're using those means. Again, not trying to say it.
Yeah, true.
Just kind of trying to think through like what is meaning, what is causing us to not see other types of reclaiming as also part of the state. Like art, right, is very, very also part of systems of power. Like the way hip hop, for example, is immediately taken out of it, or other types of art.
I just thought our option of head for justice. I think we are discussing whether it should be only peaceful or can we use violence. I just felt maybe it has been our question, like as a humanity, it has been like our question for a long time because there has been this Martin Luther King and who was his friend, who has this Black Tiger movement. Yeah. And there was this Thich Nhat Hanh and the other Buddhist monk in Vietnam. Who else we had before they came to the world? We don't know. Maybe I think maybe it will be just a question like forever, like now, like whether how we should claim justice will just stay with us. Maybe it's our right of like oneself as an individual to reclaim my justice to myself. Is my right to define how I'm reaching to that place? Unless I'm, using what?
It's okay. I think there is also like where do you draw the line on violence? So is stealing violence, is quacking violence, is throwing eggs and tomatoes someone violence.
Destroying property. I saw an adaptation of Andreas Malm's How to Blow Up a Fire Violence the other day, which was great. It's is that violence? Blowing up an oil pipeline.
There's also like a state of legitimizing certain actions, right? I feel like even within movements, the moment someone gets violent, the movement loses legitimacy even for its people. And I'll give an example of how this happens at the individual level. I only remember the US data because I wrote something on it. How survivors of sexual violence who respond with violence to the harm-doer are criminalized at a higher rate than the perpetrators themselves. I think 77% of them go to jail or something like that. And that makes me think about like what response gets legitimized by state. Because we can all say we have a choice, but do we really have a choice? Something we were speaking about earlier is also like, what protest does the state give permission for? And because every time we do a protest in India, I go to the police station and get a permission slip to say you can protest in this area for this time to this time. So what is it giving permission for? And that's where my questions of like violence have been coming. That's all. Yeah.
This whole conversation puts me in mind of this quote that was dug out. This David Graeber from Anarchist Anthropology. Academics love Michel Foucault's argument that identifies knowledge and power and insists that brute force is no longer a major factor in social control. They love it because it flatters them, the perfect formula for people who like to think of themselves as political radicals, even though all they do is write essays likely to be read by a few dozen other people in an institutional environment. Of course, if any of these academics were to walk into their university library to consult some volume of Foucault without having remembered to bring a valid ID, and decided to enter the stats anyway, they would soon discover that brute force is a reality not so far away as they like to imagine. A man with a big stick, trained in exactly how hard to hit people with it, would rapidly appear to eject them. In fact, the threat of that man with the stick permeates our world at every moment. Most of us have given up even thinking of crossing the innumerable lines and barriers he creates, just so we don't have to remind ourselves of his existence. If you see a hungry woman standing several yards away from a huge pile of food, a daily occurrence for most of us who live in cities, there is a reason you can't just come and take some of the food and give it to her. A man with a big stick will come and very likely hit you. Anarchists, in contrast, have always delighted in reminding us of him. Residents of the squatter community of Christiania in Denmark, for example, have taken a Christmas ritual where they dress like Santa and take toys, from department stores and distribute them to children on the street, partly just so everyone can relish in the images of cops beating down Santa and snatching toys back from crying.
Did you put on the
Yeah. Yeah. From the rare readings. Yeah. Cool.
I would say it's really hard sometimes to be, I guess, firm in your beliefs and confident and have like this act as you think, as you say, and that has a variety of ways of showing. Sometimes that can be violent for some people. Sometimes it is just against some people and it's violence just for them. I also think that when you're protesting and what you're looking for is to be legitimized, you're probably not gonna be. I have stopped searching for it for a long time. Because the idea behind, for me, the idea behind protest, depending on what happens, I don't know, but the idea behind protest is the rights that I'm trying to fight for. That has a lot of things that I can't control in it. I can't control what I do. I can control how I conduct myself, and I can control how I live my life and what I do and the way I do whatever I do. But I can't control how everyone's gonna take it. I can't control everything that comes to it. Like I have been in protests where there's no violence and then something happens and then everything goes to hell and then everything is violent. But I'm not gonna just say no. I'm not gonna take part of this. I'm still fighting for what I was fighting. My point of all of this is that it's not binary. It's just whatever happens in that moment and how we act towards it, I guess, and how do we really stand for whatever we believe in. How do we fight? And I do think everyone has a different way of fighting. Even the essays and academics doing that. That's also important. That's why we're here also. We learn from academics and we learn from what people are thinking about all of that. It goes into something. And I think instead of just arguing about or
thinking about if we can be violent or not or whatever, because I think that goes a bit out of our control sometimes, or not most times. It's about if we are really fighting the good fight, whatever we're doing.
On that note, that's a very fine thing to say, thank you. So, this is the time to close the Unruly Politics module, of course, we're finishing now. There were possibly two layers to it. One of them is to explore some sort of provocative, really thought-provoking ideas that you can make use of in your own decisions, and to suggest that it is worth going as far as philosophy, where you're getting at questions of what is this thing about inexistence or existence? What does dignity really mean? And those sorts of questions. And at the same time, the sort of practical, everyday questions about, how does protest happen? How does resistance happen? When does it, do whatever it does? So you've got these two layers. One is about you, and the other is about a sort of understanding of the world of which we are a part, and giving you an opportunity to see it in multiple ways and to share your extraordinary range of experience with one another on this topic of which I know you all really care about, which is the good, that thing that you're after. And so we looked at this idea of liminality, the idea of being on a threshold between worlds. We looked at things like weapons of the weak, which is where you have lots of little resistances that are important in dignity and are important in achieving little wins and things like that. And we looked at questions of ambiguity and how you navigate and how you how it's possible. We were having this conversation earlier about allyship. How do you ally with those who are having a struggle and who you might consider a more difficult time than you're having? What's your part in that? So those sorts of questions, and questions of being able to see things from completely other points of view, rather than sympathy or looking at people as victims, suddenly seeing from within and saying, "Whoa, look at that!" I learn, I benefit from being in the same world as you. We looked at aesthetics. This question about what are we able to see and not see, and has this course made any difference to what we can see and what we can't see? Suddenly the world becomes more multicolored and also more confusing. It's lovely. And the prefiguring, which you're already doing, but every single one of the sessions is in some way about prefiguring. A world where that which we know, what I did on that, the truth, love, that sort of stuff, is made stronger. And then the event itself is sort of all the different things that happen. And Badiou's idea of history, that you've got these forces of oppression, but at the same time you've got these forces of, we're not going to put up with this. How they emerge, what happens, totally out of control. But you're part of it, we're all part of it. So that's why we run this course, and I hope that you have found it sort of stimulating, and that it's given you something that has strengthened your own agenda, your own way of doing it, and also ways in connections. Don't mean that you're better able to do what you want to do on this planet. Just to say, there is a module, whatever, evaluation. If you do need it, I'm awfully sorry to everyone who possibly don't do it. But we learn from it, but actually, the Unruly Politics, because actually one's imagine is constantly under threat.
Yeah.
It was nearly closed down several times. What? Yes. Why?
Doesn't want you? Yeah. Why do you think?
It doesn't fit much with this. It's not motivated.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not
So, what you say about it is important. We need to understand where we can make things better. There's so many things we could have been looking at, and we'd love to hear more about that. But equally, we do need your, if you think other students need to take this course, you have to support this.
I said so.
This should be
Thank
you very much, and Liz, I thought, did they do it in
Yeah,
one
they did.
Thank you everybody for all the sessions that you did. I absolutely love this course because I love the way you teach it.
you.
I can take you.
Group
Yeah, in the background of my laptop.
blur out faces though, because otherwise we'll be on a list.
Yes. It has to be. But it has to be.
Yeah.
But it has to be an unruly photo. Otherwise, what's the point? It can't be a.
Upside down.
Yes.
I want to. Yeah, so you already. Yeah.
Yeah, but there is
I think it's a website where you go different universities, but has
yeah.
it has nothing to do with it.
It's probably someone maybe. Yeah, probably go online and do.
I can just do it in Colombia, like this.
Where's the picture?
Do it rather than advise not yet.
When it's been told, it's how to inspire something. But maybe I guess.
Yes.
What happens afterwards? I think it's also
I'm getting one.
Really cool.
What I can't do is
I think it's also from my side.
Because it's my
The question is why I can see also in his He's kind of neat like everything.
Yeah, that's what I think it's
required a lot of strength. In addition to the
Parking and maybe half of my hair. I can understand. When we talk about like practice, maybe of course like capture I don't speak the bigger like it's not well. Yeah, go to square one. You should have been my You should have been my I don't know. I just kind of bring everything into Christmas here.
Yeah, right now I can't.
I put each of my week.
No, it's going to be
I don't know how to read. So I'm going to go to read. Thank you.
I'm so sorry. I want to talk to you. Everyone just use Yes, take a picture. Oh, I will take the picture too. But you probably take because I don't know this person.
Different background.
Yeah, 9/11 is
Yeah, this is not our brand.
Maybe like a picture of a protest.
That was the one that the jazz.
This one?
Is the first one got Badiou's cover on it? No, that's not
The last.
Where is it? This. Oh, there was
This
another
one,
one.
this
This. That one! Oh,
Shift F5.
that's fast.
Yeah.
Practice.
You like that guy? That guy took goes to
Where do you stay?
I think that's one of the Egyptian.
Yeah, I think so.
Come on. Are you okay with that? Come on, I need help.
Hello, yes. Wait.
Are we big enough to look like some of us need?
We are.
You can do like that.
Yeah, maybe something
Unruly.
One, two, yeah, this. Unruly.
Oh.
Yay. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. This would have probably been more
Honorary.
I agree with that.
Can we pretend it as much as
Please, another picture.
Wasn't in our picture.
Come on. Be unruly.
What are we doing now? I know, bro. I'm not sure.
Thank you.
You know they're gonna kill us, right?
Bad bunny.
Did you do it? Did you do it?
Unruly.
It was unruly. I was speechless. I learned from Badiou.
You did?
I didn't know what to do because I didn't do it. Now I'm bitter. You know you.